So before I start talking, I just want to explain why I decided to make this channel. It's an old gaming channel from years ago. I decided to delete everything and just start again. The reason I did that is because I'm just fed up of the way things are in the UK. It is just so difficult just to get by, make ends meet. It's difficult for everyone. It doesn't seem to be getting better, and the political class just seem to do everything that doesn't help the average working person, which is myself, and I would imagine most of you watching. So, with that in mind, I wanted to make a place where we could just come and talk. I could give you my thoughts, you could give me your thoughts back. We could maybe just have a little bit of a moan of the state of the country and maybe talk about ways it can be fixed and how things are going to change moving forward. Because at the moment, it's probably the biggest change in the political landscape for, well, definitely my lifetime. It's going to go from the two-party uni system of Labour and Conservatives trading power back and forth and basically doing the exact same job as each other, to now a situation where you're looking like on the right it's going to be Reform, and on the left it's largely going to be the Greens and maybe some other parties. And this day being May the 7th, where it is the local elections today, I thought this is a good time to start this channel, because today is going to be the day where the people actually finally get a chance on scale to actually voice their disappointment with the Labour government and how things are being run at their council level. And I think this one is kind of going to be a precursor for what could happen in a couple of years in the general election, but more so, it's going to be a protest vote against Labour. And I think that is going to be interesting to see just how decimated they are, because as you can probably tell, I live in Wales by my voice, and this has largely been a Labour hotbed. My parents and grandparents always voted Labour their entire life, just because that's generally what Welsh people did, and time after time we've been let down by Labour and joined by Plaid Cymru at times as well. And it's just got to the point where no one I speak to anymore is going to vote for Labour. Everyone else is voting for someone else. So Labour are going to get decimated across the board, across the UK, and it's going to be really interesting to see who pops up instead of them. Because, let's face it, it's not going to be the Conservatives. They already got their council seats wiped out a few years back, and I think that's going to be a continuation of that today and into tomorrow. Regardless of, it seems like Kemi Badenoch is saying a lot of the right things, and she's getting a lot of praise from people I speak to and online and in the news, because she's quite stern, and it's nice to hear a little bit of a refreshing take, a more actually conservative person, at least on the surface. Unfortunately for the Conservatives, their track record over the last few years means they've got no chance of getting anywhere near power, in my opinion. So what's going to be interesting, if we focus on Wales first, because that's where I am, seems like a straight shootout between Plaid Cymru and Reform. Now, Reform are pretty strong, but there is a real sentiment of being against Reform in Wales, and the people who are against Reform seem to be leaning towards Plaid Cymru. Plaid Cymru won a Caerphilly by-election a few months ago, which was very hotly contested. Even Nigel Farage went to Caerphilly to try and tip the balance, and it was relatively close, but Plaid Cymru were clear winners in that by-election, and I think that was a big moment for them as a party who wants to govern and govern Wales, similar to what SNP had and power that they've had when they've had a big majority in Scotland. And when you look at the polls, at least a couple of weeks ago, Plaid Cymru were just above Reform, and they were looking like they were going to take the majority of the seats, with Reform taking another bulk on the right side of the politics. What's been interesting to watch from my point of view, though, is now that they seem to be getting a lot more attention, and this is something that we'll talk about with the Greens as well, now that they're getting more attention and coming under more scrutiny by average, normal people who are not that really interested in politics, they seem to be slipping up. And in the polls, they've slowly been creeping back down, and Reform have kind of gone just above them now in the polls in Wales. And I think the main reason for that is, in my opinion, is because when you actually listen to the policies that Plaid Cymru seem to put across, and some of the candidates, quite frankly, that they're running and what they seem to stand for a Welsh National Party, air quotes, they don't really seem to talk about Wales very much, which is really strange to me. You have a party which is supposed to be hoping for maybe Welsh independence in the future, as much power as they can to govern the country, and they seem to be talking about every other country and the woes of the Middle East, rather than focusing on Wales, which has been struggling for years, has struggled for such a long time, and just doesn't seem to get much help from Westminster. And you'd think with air quote Welsh National Party getting in power, they would want to be focusing a lot more into improving things for people in Wales, but they seem to be just echoing the uniparty sentiments of wanting to virtue signal and look after every other nationality with open arms and give them everything, while Welsh people struggle to make ends meet. It makes no sense to me. And that's why I think maybe Reform have had a real uptick in the last few weeks, and that's due to the fact that they actually talk about the issues for people in Wales. Whether Reform are going to deliver, I've never liked Nigel Farage. I've always thought he was a charlatan, and he's basically continued, in my opinion, to show himself to be that way. But looking at some of Reform's policies, they do tend to lean more to things that affect Welsh people. The one thing that stands out to me is they want to build the M4 relief road around Newport. I don't know if that'll happen because I don't know if they'll be able to get the money to do that. But that is a real big thing that Welsh people, especially in the south of Wales, want. They also seem to have a heavy emphasis on farmers, which is a large part of the rural part of Wales, of course, which is a huge part that's been neglected for so long. And, you know, our food security is so important, but the current government and the government before them seem to have done everything they can to make it difficult for farmers, and they just seem to want to turn farmland into forests and meadows and solar farms and wind farms, and at the expense of our food security, meaning that we have to import everything, meaning everything is more expensive. It just makes no sense. And then turning my attention over to England, then I think this is going to be a straight shootout largely between Reform and the Greens. You are going to see some people maybe who are not as extreme and trying to be as pretty centrist as possible going for the Lib Dems, so you probably see them gain some seats, but they're, in my opinion, basically an irrelevant party because they just don't really do anything. But you're going to see a battle between the Greens and Reform, and I think it's going to be pretty evenly split. Now, Reform went on a massive tear, especially in England, and they gained a lot of support. Recently, it's really kind of crumbled since Restore announced themselves, and people who are inclined to be more to the right have kind of moved to that because Rupert Lowe seems to say things that generally British people want to hear, or people at least on the right want to hear. Whereas instead of sticking to their base, Reform tried going more to the centre, and even with some left-wing policies, which kind of frustrated a lot of their core voters. A lot of them kind of went to Restore. And since then, I think Farage has been a little bit in his feelings about it, and he's doing classic Farage and flip-flopping and trying to get them back. On the left side, though, you've seen a massive surge in the Greens. To be honest, I think this is largely because Labour are now proving themselves to be useless, and they're going to make themselves basically obsolete over the next few years because of their policies and how Keir Starmer is just, well, actually, I better not say, otherwise I might get a knock at the door in the middle of the night. But anyway, we've seen a massive rise in Green sentiment, and it seems like Zach Polanski has managed to whip up quite a lot of support, particularly at the younger demographic, which is understandable. But similar to what I mentioned about Plaid Cymru, now that he's had a lot more limelight and he's had a lot more TV appearances with proper journalists who are going to ask him hardball questions, he seems to really struggle to back up any of his policies. There's very little he ever really offers. He seems very vague with his promises, and a lot of it is very wishy-washy, which, if you actually read the reactions online, a lot of people are getting a little bit cautious now about voting for Zach Polanski. Obviously, there's been a lot of revelations this week about how much he's lied on his CV, said he worked for the Red Cross and he didn't, said he was actually qualified as a hypnotherapist, but he was just a student. There was a few more things. And there's a lot of strange things that have been happening around him. Of course, he's come under a lot of heat for criticising the police that reacted in the Golders Green incident, just for my opinion, if anyone cares, I think the police did a fantastic job. If a guy's holding a knife and he's got a backpack on and he's just stabbed 2 people, you don't know what's in the backpack, and you've got to do whatever you can to dismantle and disarm him. And also, that guy who was a bystander who jumped in, I salute you, my friend. But anyway, back to Polanski. The juxtaposition that the Greens seem to have in their policies and how much they actually make sense, both economically and just in practice. The rent controls, the billionaire taxation, it doesn't work in practice, and there's been plenty of examples of that across the world. They've tried to tax the billionaires, they all leave. They've tried rent controls, all landlords just sell up, and then there's a housing shortage. They just don't work, and once you scrutinise them, they crumble. And that's shown time after time when you had Green spokespeople on programs that are actually going to ask them hard-hitting questions. They just can't answer, other than maybe Question Time where they just softball tee them up for everything. They just can't give you a concise, clear answer about how these things are going to work and why they'll work and their plans to implement them and stuff like that. Having said all that, because there isn't really a vote on the left that's particularly viable, I think we'll see a big surge in Green voters and councils getting run by Green voters, and vice versa on the right, because the Conservatives have collapsed. I think we'll see a massive surge in Reform votes, and Reform will take over a lot of councils, as will the Greens. What will be interesting in practice then is to see how they manage their councils over the next few years, because that's going to be a good indication as to what they'll be like governing the country. Obviously, Reform are still ahead in the polls. If there was an election today, I think they would take over. But the interesting thing for me is going to be to see what happens all the way over in Little Great Yarmouth, where Rupert Lowe has basically just targeted that area and those constituencies as Restore Britain's first target to take over a council and run it with a by-election over there as well. If they can take 8 or maybe even more and take the majority, they're going to have a big platform moving forward now, and I think they'll start being seen by more people as a viable option, and then that will give them a springboard to be able to campaign more across the UK. So that'll be interesting. What I think we'll also see is a massive rise in independence as well, because people don't know where to turn, because the uni-party system of Labour and the Conservatives have basically capitulated over the last year. And I think you'll see independents popping up, maybe independents forming groups of possibly sectarian groups, and they'll group their councils together and run them in that way, but they'll all be independents. They may even make a party heading into the general election. It'll all remain to be seen. So that's my opinion on what I think could happen today, and what I'll do is my next video, I'll react after the local elections are finished, and then we'll talk about the results and what that could possibly mean for politics in the UK moving forward over the next couple of years. Thanks for watching and subscribe.